All right, hello everybody. Welcome back and welcome to another webinar. Now, I decided that this is actually going to be quite a good one because I hear many of us talking about reinforcers and hey, you know what? I can't find the right reinforcer for my animal. I cannot find this. I cannot find. It's all good. What I'm going to do is I am going to try and explain from scratch the process that I would take if I would start to train an animal that has never been trained before. Where do I look at? What am I gonna do, and how do I extend this reinforcement process? And that's kind of what I want to teach you guys. And there's a lot of little things that you might be like, but Peter, wait a second, just tell me how to do it. I get that, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to teach you where you might, when you started your training program with any animal, where you might have missed a step maybe, and that's why there are potential reasons why the animal doesn't take any reinforcers anymore, or we don't have any other reinforcers anymore, and so on. So that's kind of what I'm gonna try and do for you. All right, so now if there's any questions, which is all good, just throw them in the chat. I will then, after this whole session, I will actually go on with talk about these questions itself. All right, so I will not do that during, I'll do that after. So just drop them in the chat and then we just go from there. I hope everybody can hear me properly. All right, so let's just go for it. So beyond food, expanding your reinforcer toolbox. That's what we're going to talk about. Quite an important topic, I believe. Right? So the first thing is, and I want to point this out right away, and I said it in other webinars, well, actually, I say it everywhere. I believe the animal is always right. Always. So this directly means that if we say, but this should be a reinforcer to you, but this should be a reinforcer to you, that the animal actually decides that. We don't decide anything. We just have to observe. Okay. Now, if I talk reinforcement, and I've been into many different parks, and one of the first things I'm always asking is, okay, wait a second, before we talk about reinforcers in general, what is actually the definition of a reinforcement? What is it exactly? Now, this is one of the things that we speak about because we're so focused on food reinforcers all the time that we are missing 100 other reinforcers we could have used. So the last place I worked at, they basically said reinforcement. Whenever we talk about reinforcement, we talk about food reinforcement. And I said, okay, we have to stop that because from the definition point of view and so on, nah. Let's not do that, because at the end of the day, a reinforcer is really anything that increases behavior. It does not matter as long as it increases behavior. That's essentially what a reinforcer is. Now that sounds very simple, but I do want to point it out because there are so many little things that the animal responds to in our environment which we are missing all the time, which we could have used as a reinforcer. That's the big thing. So, what makes a reinforcer a reinforcer? A reinforcer is anything which increases the likelihood of a behavior. That's basically what it is. This can be anything. Right? This can be anything. Now, funny enough, so in the house where I live, we have two dogs. We have a pug, Charlie, and we have a border collie, Luna. Now, Charlie doesn't seem to play much with toys. Doesn't really. He really seemed to enjoy being pet, which is a good thing. But then we discovered out of the blue, say, you know what, if you don't want to play with tennis balls, that's fine, that's okay. Luna does that a lot, playing with tennis balls. But then we had this little golf ball laying around, and I'm just starting to throwing it and see if like what would happen. And out of the blue, Charlie was going crazy about this golf ball. I was like, what? Okay. So I could have used the golf ball now as a reinforcer all of a sudden, which I didn't really have to condition really. I was just playing with this. So if I now use that in my reinforcer strategy, there we go. So this could be anything and everything, really. So the question is only, and I like to have we grab the theory from books like Don't Shoot the Dog or any other books. I have some science books here too. If we grab that theory and we place that in practice, which is the hardest thing in the world, but we place it in practice, we have to question ourselves. Okay, it's all great. Reinforcement, Peter, yeah, sure. Increases the likelihood, great. This can be anything, sure. But how do we know it was a reinforcer? That's the next question. How do we know this? Now, and this comes down to a measurable point, and everything that we can measure is factual. Otherwise, we can't measure it, right? So, what I'm talking about is we can measure behavior. So, if the behavior comes back in the future, what we have applied was a reinforcer. Because we can measure that part. Hey, I see that behavior again. Hey, I see that behavior again. And over time, you see it happening more and more often, which means now that the animal got it, and then the behavior comes back because you have been reinforcing it. That's kind of how you measure it. Sounds very simple, but I'm gonna make it more complicated. So this is an example. There you go. So a recall with a lot of meerkats. You know, animals are gonna come inside. Reinforcement is right there. There you go. So there's a high likelihood this behavior is gonna happen next time again. Really. Now this is the little thing which essentially comes down to that ABC structure. Really, what I very often like to talk about as well. The ABCs of behavior. Really. Now. One of the very first things that I like to do, and I like to do that with a Burberry macaque, I like to do this with a gemsbok, I like to do this with a zebra, but I also like to do this with a horse, I like to do this with a dog, I like to do this with a cat, with everything and anything. So I basically throw different food sources in front of them. Whatever it is, as long as it's welfare wise good, it's all right for the welfare, really. So I'm just throwing it at them, and now I'm going to just stand there. I'm just going to observe, what do they eat first? What do they interact with first? And if they grab the food, do they eat it or do they spit it out again? What do they do? And from that observation, my very first one, I basically figure out, hey, okay, so this animal prefers, likes to eat this over that, grabs this over this. It's like, interesting. Then on top of this, what I do is, okay, so now if we give them the normal food during the day, whatever that food source is, what part of the food that they get? Now, it's often pellets, it's leaf eater, biscuits, it's a lot of different things. You see with dogs obviously as well, what they eat and such. But it's the same thing with, you know, when I lived in Sweden, my mates had 2 cats. And we wanted to train them for that recall because we thought, you know, if we gonna leave them outside, or leave them outside, let them outside, we would like to also call them back in and so on. So I started to think, I was like, well, all right, so what reinforcer do we have? What can we use? Then I discovered that, okay, and I was just trying a whole lot of stuff. I just became creative. So let's see. So we had this little foil, I think it's like little cardboard with little foil on it. And it's actually the package from salmon, from smoked salmon. So then I used that, so the salmon was gone, but there's still the smell and little oily stuff on it. And I just showed that to them, and only one of them started to lick it. The other one couldn't really care much. Like, okay, good to know. And that's how I slowly start to try and figure out what are the reinforcers they enjoy. That's kind of how I go for. And I'm not even training animals yet. I'm just saying here, food or whatever I have, let's find out. Let's just find out what they seem to enjoy and what I can use right away. And that sometimes it's a reinforcer which hasn't been conditioned yet. So they, like for example, cats is the easiest example. When you have like a little stick with a little bungee cord and there's little feather stuff, you throw it in the air, they become interested to it and they start to chase it around. So it's like this trigger or whatever. I can use that part as a reinforcer again to behavior, the behavior I'm looking for. So I don't necessarily have to train this. Now, in case of like all these zoo animals, like this is one of the first things we start with because there's a lot of safety things happening there as well. Mind you, I also like to point out, before we say my animal doesn't eat anything, it can also be the fact that the animal doesn't accept any food from you as a behavior. So it will eat it by themselves, but it's not accepting it when you try to feed it to them. So the problem now is not the food source, the problem is actually the animal doesn't want to take it from you. So you have to teach them to accept that they have to take the food from you. That does not mean food doesn't work. So the focus is actually not the right focus in this case. Because at the end of the day, an animal must eat. They must eat anyway. They must eat. There's no way the animal doesn't eat. So therefore, I believe that, hey, there's something else missing. Something very important is missing. And what is missing is our ability to observe well, to find out what that is. Now, this is another example. So with fur seals, those ones are trained for quite some time, but we try to figure out, what does the fur seal prefer, right? So we have a hose, it's warm water, or we have a horse brush. Now, fur seals have double layers of fur, and especially when they go into molt, you can see in this fur seal a little bit that the head is actually a little bit like the fur starts to go away and then it regrows back. Again, it's 2 layers of fur. So having this rough horse brush actually helps them getting rid of all these hairs, which is itchy and stuff like this. So, but the warm water is also very nice. So this little fur seal knows both of them. She understands what both means. And then we just say, here are your both options. What do you want? There you go. So this time it's choosing water. Does not mean that next time I will not choose the brush. All right. So, but now we discover, okay, great. So I can use that as my reinforcer for further behaviors. Mind you, and I'll come back to that at the very end of this presentation. Mind you, sometimes it's not about what they choose, but it's about they have control over that decision, which is the reinforcing factor, basically. I'll come back to that. All right, so then now, another important part is that now we understand, like, what do they eat, what do they like, we use water or we use a brush, we can run around, we can go completely crazy if we like, but it's your capability of observing in the animal's daily life what actually maintains specific behavior, because it happens all the time. So we are not just asking behaviors and all that stuff. No, I'm just going to sit there, look at like observe my animal in their natural habitat or wherever they are, and I'm just looking. I'm going to see, and see, that's interesting. So this happens, and then that's the outcome, and then this behavior happens, and then there's another consequence happening. It's like, okay. And that way, I can start to find out what they enjoy. So it's not me trying to touch them and all that stuff. No, let me first find out. Mind you, some animals are very touchy type of animals, okay? If we talk about a tapir, if we talk about a rhino, dogs very often. It's depending on their history a lot, of course. But so anyway, so whichever reinforcer we find, we're going to use this as to teach a task. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is that I see many people. So imagine you find a food source, right? You think, okay, great, I found a food source, I find one, let's go. But now you're non-stop using this food source, but you're also using this food source as a baiting strategy. Look at this, come here, come here, come here. Now come there, come there, come there. And all of a sudden, what's going to happen is this food source is not working anymore because we overused it. And now all of a sudden we say, ha, the animal doesn't eat anything. No, it's actually not about doesn't eat anything. It's about the training strategy we applied, why it's not working. That's what it comes down to. Okay? So whichever reinforcer we find, we're going to use this as to teach a task. Now, the ABCs, that's what it comes down to. So you have your antecedent, which means signal, cue, trigger. And then the behavior will follow. That's what it comes down to. And then after the behavior will follow, the consequence comes. And so we ask the signal, behavior comes, consequence comes. Okay? So this is kind of how that baiting system looks like. So that's not that ABC structure. This is the ABC structure a little bit overlapping one another a little bit too much here and there. All right? Yeah. So as you see, I'm just saying, come here, showing the food source, come on then. And the animal just comes there, sees what I have already, and eats. Now the problem of this is that if I give away what I have, the animal can now make the decision to say, but I don't want the carrot, I'm not gonna come. So now I also have to come with a bag of carrots maybe, or the animal forces me to start grabbing an apple instead, for example, or, now that keeps on going, basically. So that's why we have to be a little bit careful in that case, because we can actually, how we call it, satiate the reinforcer. We can overuse it, so it's not a reinforcer anymore. Which now we're going to say, if we do not recognize that, now we're basically saying the food doesn't work anymore, for example. So, reinforcement is placed right there. So I'm asking, for example, these meerkats that we saw, toot 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 means come inside. So, toot 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 is the signal, behavior is come inside, they're coming inside, bam, consequence giving, there you go, right? So, but we want to have the reinforcer, but we don't want to use the reinforcer as a signal to trigger the behavior to then use that same reinforcer that we're already shown, carrot with the tortoise, so then when you come, there you go, you have it, like the baiting luring strategy. We don't want to do that. That's not the ABC structure we are looking for. We want to teach the animal behavior, consequence, behavior, consequence, behavior, consequence. That's what we're trying to teach. Because if we teach that, that gives you a solid base for the future. And if that solid base is there, now we can progress properly in our training. We can apply more difficult systems. We can do a whole lot of stuff. Baiting doesn't do that at all. Baiting is actually going to work against you in the future. So therefore we always say, if we talk baiting and learning, we always say, hey, the first one, maybe two approximations in your plan, surely you can use it. But you directly have to shift to that ABC system within your approximation. Because if you do that, there's a higher likelihood, it's easier for you to teach new reinforcers, add new reinforcers, and build a stronger relationship with your animals. That's what it comes down to. So therefore, I wanted to point this out. So I know we haven't really talked about other reinforcers just yet, but I just want to point out that this process, what I just explained to you, this process, I'm gonna tell you, and I'm quite confident about this, if you're testing it like the way I explained, if you are looking for the little things the animal seems to enjoy, and if you're using that in your advantage, I'm gonna guarantee you have success. If you are all of a sudden saying, oh yes, they eat carrot, so I'm only using carrot from now on, then there's a high likelihood you've satiated this carrot and also they don't eat carrot anymore. And now you're back to square zero. Find another food reinforcer. Now, and that is the biggest challenge. And then we say, my animal doesn't eat anything. Yes, they do, because they have to eat to survive. So surely they eat something, right? So that's how I want to work with it. And this is kind of how I process this. So anytime a trainer comes to me, or somebody with a horse, or, you know, especially in the zoo world, really, where animals are never been trained before, they said, okay, let's start this. So what do we use as a reinforcer? Or the food source. Like, okay, so if you're saying to me, if we throw this, they're going to eat it. They say, yes, okay, let's throw it, and they don't eat it. It's like, okay, that didn't work. So, okay, what can we use? Are there little things that we can use which are actually quite okay for the animal to eat? Let's find out. Throw a lot at them. We take a couple steps back and we now observe, what do they eat first? That's going to help you a lot. And then hopefully we can use 5 different food sources, hopefully. So you're never really just locked into that one carrot or that one biscuit or whatever. Because if that's the case, and we're going to say, oh, they like this, oh, they think it's great, that's the moment you start satiating them, and that's the moment you fall into a wall at one point where the animal says, I don't want this anymore. And then we don't have consequences. And then we can't train anymore. So there's a process, but I'm going to explain you a little bit more. So reinforcement, we're going to use what they eat. Like, for example, these little foxes.
Oh, that's eating.
It's so good. It's pretty straightforward, right? So you just use you're just using what they what they're eating, like their meat in this case. Especially with carnivores, we see that a lot. You know, we do see that a lot. What you do see with, for example, dogs and cats a lot is that we're actually using cheese all of a sudden. Well, with animals like those foxes, we're still trying to stay in the nutritional phase, what we want them to eat. So we don't want to add in cheese or, you know, other things they normally don't eat. So we're very careful with those things. So therefore we just use what they eat already, and we do not add in all of a sudden things that are not necessarily good for them, which is what does work. And that's what you see in the dog world, for example, a lot. People bringing that extra cheese, bringing that other stuff. And I remember that when I was in Norway, they had these dogs and they were doing search and rescue, and I thought it was super cool to watch search and rescue training, like how it all builds and does. And the interesting thing was, like, this lady who was training this, and she says, you know what, I have this little ball with me because the animal goes crazy for that ball. I was like, oh, great, cool, that's why. But then if she didn't have the ball with her, the animal would not do the behavior. So that's an opposite issue. Now, can you imagine that we are in full-on search and rescue? It is serious. We're looking for somebody, but she forgot the ball out of stress. And all of a sudden, the dog's like, not doing it. I think that's a bit of an issue. So, therefore, in that case, it's quite important to use other reinforcers. So we started to work on this, and I explained them how we do this with different animals, how we look into variability in our reinforcers, how we are actually teaching the animal, hey, you do not know what you are going to get reinforced, but you know it's going to be nice, and you know it's going to be good. So that creates that curiosity factor, and that curiosity factor actually reinforces the behavior even more at the end of the day. So, what is interesting to me is that the other day I talked with my little brother, and he has 2 cats at home as well, and these cats are actually, they're a bit skittish. So we wrote a training plan for them together, and now they're training them, and then they're trying a lot of different reinforcers, which I suggested to them, because we also don't want them to be fuzzy about food. Now, on the side story of this is, imagine you have to give your animals some medication. They train their animals for just to eat everything and anything, which is great. So that's what they do. And now medication is no problem anymore. We can actually apply this variable reinforcement drastically throughout the day with training them and whatnot, and they now run towards them on the recall signal like there's no tomorrow. So it's a great thing to see, to use different reinforcers, not get stuck on that one reinforcer all the time, which is to me very important. So, which makes me bring to something that we don't talk enough about, which is competing reinforcers. Now, this whole operant conditioning thing, where reinforcers come from, what B.F. Skinner presented, right? Like from the theory of Thorndike, he presented that these reinforcers, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, obviously the other quadrants, But he did that in this operant chamber, right? So this little box, no distractions whatsoever. There's a pigeon in there, or in other instances he had rats in there for different research projects. Anyway, but there's no distractions, just a box, a lever, or a packing disc on the wall, and then a little food dispenser, essentially. So that's how he worked through this. Now, if we now think about our zoological facilities, our home situations with our dogs and cats, or other pets you have at home, the situations in the paddocks, all that stuff. There's a lot of sounds. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of stuff. So, and that's where competing reinforcers come in. So if I say to the rhinos in this case, hey, come over to me, and the rhinos are looking at me, it's like, yeah, okay, and they just keep on eating. It's like, okay, so apparently this grass might be better than what I have. So, okay, so what am I going to do next? So essentially, I'm now going to look into what can I use? What are the sources that they're getting now? I'm going to tell you one thing. I've worked with rhinos, or tried to create programs in Sweden with white rhinos. I've been asked in Knowsley Safari Park in the UK to help them with their rhinos. I work with an Indian rhino, a couple of them in the Netherlands. White rhinos seem to be a bit fuzzy. They seem to be a little bit like, hey, you know what you all present, I don't want it. I've never seen this before. So that made it interesting to me. So then all of a sudden, like, you know what? But what do they eat? And especially in Knowsley Safari Park, where it kind of looked like this, like with those two rhinos and a nice green grass, they were eating grass all the time. So I was like, you know what? Nothing really seemed to work what we were trying. They're eating grass the whole day. Let's just use what they're eating right there and then. Now, that grass was our competing reinforcer. It was a reinforcer which competed with our reinforcer, which potentially was even better than the reinforcer we were applying or trying to apply. That does not mean, so as I mentioned before, reinforcers is anything that increases behavior, surely. But if I have a reinforcer, which is still good, like I know that they would, for example, we use lucerne. I know they would normally eat this. But if they have a decision to make between lucerne and green grass, they choose green grass. That doesn't mean that they don't eat lucerne. So this is a little bit of the challenge. So let's go, what are we going to do? So I said to the keepers, you know what? Let's look into if we can use this competing reinforcer in our advantage. So the reinforcer in the exhibit is stronger than your reinforcer. That's the competing reinforcer. Now this can be anything really. So can we use it in our advantage? Now you can see it right here. There are some carrots, some lucerne, but what I'm focusing on is now that grass. So before we would train, we would like pluck some grass, basically. So often we want to compete with that reinforcer because they should just come to us. This is what happens very often. So when we have a competing reinforcer, we don't recognize there is one. So what happens is animals do not respond, and we keep on calling them, and we keep on trying to get them because they should just come to us. They should just respond. But the animal, if you look at it, apparently there's a reinforcer better than yours. And that's what you're competing against. And some people call it the animal's playing me, or whatever they all say. I believe the animal's always right. So I'm probably missing something. Now in this case, what they're getting right now is better as what I'm giving. So that means that what they have is the competing reinforcer to what I have. So, and therefore, hey, you know what? Let's try to use this in our advantage. Can we? Now, with those rhinos, we could. So as you can see, we then did, what we then did was, hey, competing reinforcer, here's grass, plus the lucerne, plus the carrot. So you get like a mixture of all of a sudden. And because there's what we give them is the same as what they can eat anyway, if we then mix that with some other stuff, all of a sudden we are actually having a better outcome than what they get by themselves already, if that makes sense. So when you're by yourself grazing, you just get grass. But if you come to us, you get grass plus more. Now, and that is then the option for the animals. Okay, hey, maybe these trainers have outcompeted our reinforcer. I really want to go to them because we can get basically the same or similar plus more. So that's how you can use it in your advantage, really. So, but the competing reinforcers can be anything. Don't, you know, now I'm just talking about food because it was for us, or it was for me the easiest example. But it can be anything. It can also be males or females in heat. You know, we've seen this a lot with what are they called? Dolphins. The dolphins that I used to work with, or social animals, really. So if I have a male, that male is not interested in any fish that I'm going to give. That male is interested in the females in heat. So what I can do is say, okay, I'm gonna ask a very easy behavior. Might that be, hey dolphin, male dolphin, come with me, follow me away from the females, and because you're doing that well, thank you, go back to your females. So instead of me giving a fish, I'm just saying, thank you for doing this behavior right. Now there's your consequence, going back to these females. And I can extend that basically. I'm using it in my advantage. Now it's the same for dog sniffing. Hey dog, come to me. Good. Go sniff again. Thank you. As a reinforcer to it. Other food sources, I just explained this. This can also be different type of toys. Same thing. Now one big one is, and especially when you work with, what actually can come from everywhere, anywhere. Well, often I think with horses, there's often just one owner. You know, with one owner, it's very different. But with families at home, with cats, dogs, and other animals, in zoological facilities, we see this a lot with birds of prey, for example. Now, the example I'm going to show you is a lady that has a great relationship with the Eurasian eagle owl, a very big European owl. And we use it in our advantage. So we're teaching this owl to fly from place to place, right? So we wanted this animal to fly a little bit further, okay? So this is quite difficult if you have multiple people and you have one person that has a very good relationship, and now you say, how are you gonna do that then if they have to fly away from that person with the good relationship? But I'm gonna show you in a sec. So anyway, so we can, like, it can be anything competing reinforcer at the end of the day, and some people even talk more about PREMAC principle, which is reinforcing a low probability behavior with a high probability behavior. So if I see the male going to the females, which is a high probability behavior, a low probability behavior is I'm walking away from these females. It's very not so likely that the male is going to follow me. But if he follows me as a reinforcer, I'm going to reinforce you with a high probability behavior, which is go back to these females. So that's basically the PREMAC principle. Now, we want to use those in our advantage. Instead of saying, dog, you can't sniff, you have a better relationship, here's another toy, you name it. We want to use it in our advantage. So I believe really there's reinforcers in our environment non-stop, like all the time. We just need to be willing to see them and use them in our advantage. That's all. Now in this case, it's a funny funny video. Obviously there's elephants. You see up top there where the elephant is looking at this bamboo. It just snows, so the bamboo started to hang down. Now this is a typical case of, hey, if I would start training now, there's a likelihood I don't think I'll reach much success. There you go. So competing reinforcement. Now, this is that example. So you can. So the lady up top here. This was the eagle owl. The lady up top here. She is the one that doesn't have as good of a relationship with the eagle owl. The eagle owl's name is Bella. So Bella has been sent to this lady. This lady then puts them onto, you can't really see it now, but onto this station. The other trainer who has a very good relationship with Bella walks all the way around down to another area where she's going to receive him. So at first, the bird has to fly away. That now means that the trainer that's going to receive this bird should actually use a lot of food reinforcers. Then that person on top of that is going to say, thank you, now go back to the other trainer where you have a good relationship with. That directly means that that's a reinforcer already. Then we're going to extend the flight pattern by using the relationship of the trainer. Now that trainer doesn't really have to reinforce much, but almost nothing. The relationship is already fairly established. But let's have a look. And there you go. So the animal went back to the trainer where they came from, basically. So they first went to another trainer. The trainer walked all the way around and then back to the trainer that had a better relationship. So they're using it in their advantage. Okay, so it's another strategy in that case. It's not a very important reinforcer, really. So when you look at it from the ABCs, really, you are the A when we talk, especially when we talk about introducing new reinforcers and stuff. The animal just has to look at you, right? You are the A. So the animal looks at you, yes, and then we say, okay, reinforcement, thank you. So we basically teach them to focus to us, but I'm not doing this. Hey, hello, hello, watch me, hello, here's food. Look, food, 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 there you go. No, the animal looks at me, thank you, here you go. That's how we want it, really, okay? Sounds super easy. Pretty straightforward, you'd say. But it's not always that simple, really, because you really have to look for the slightest little things. Now, another thing is that there's like, okay, I'm always very much into, okay, wait a second. So surely I can go into this full science and say, you know what, you use their food, then we're going to pet them, and then we're going to reinforce them for being pet, for example. So we're teaching them conditioned reinforcers and so on. Yeah, sure, that's what science all says. Great. But there's also other ways, and sometimes easier ways, really. So in this case, a little elephant again is actually a very funny video, I think. I hope you guys can see it well. But anyway, so the whole idea behind this is that I'm trying to play with this little elephant, okay? So therefore, I believe in any program, if you have a dog at home, a horse, a cat, elephant in the zoo, if you have dogs, does not matter. Through enrichment sessions, and I'm not talking about like you play with the animal, no. I'm talking about, here is some toys, you wait, you sit back, and you're going to observe what they play with and how they play with it. Puzzles, I have here a puzzle, you back off, let's see what they do, and see how they play with it, okay? Because how they play with it, that's how you can start playing with them, so you can get valuable information. Now, same for a relate session. Now, a relate session is different than a play session. I couldn't really find different words, but so you have an enrichment session where the animal's playing by themselves, doing their own life, doing their own things. They have a relate session, which is you and the animal together. So what I'm doing is I have the animal and I'm just, for example, patting them, giving them a massage, relax. The animal's very calm, you're very calm. That's a very like a relate session. Find out why the animal enjoys to be pet. So for example, so far any dog that I had the privilege to pet, the base of the tail is a very good spot. Now another thing is, and that's like dogs are sometimes very like, oh, what did he just do? This is actually very nice. Is on their belly, slowly on their belly, like, oh my god, that's good. So you will find those little spots. Now, when I work with the dolphins, it was under the armpits, or the flipper pits, so to say, the flipper pits. And I would just like pat them there, and they would be like, oh, and you could see their eyes, like, oh, this is actually very good. So, and because of that, I can use that again in my advantage. Enrichment session, same thing. I sit back, I look, how do they interact with this? What do they do? And I can use it in my advantage. Play sessions like this video I'm going to show you. I'm just running around. Hey, I can use that as reinforcer in my advantage. At this point, this play session, the goal is just to play. But in the back of my head, it goes, this is a lot of information that comes to me now. Hey, that's interesting. Look how it interacts with me. I even start to play a little bit hide and seek. What's happening next? That's what it comes down to. Let's have a look. So all I do is make it interesting for this little elephant, for me running, hide and seek, and so on. I was like, hey, this is interesting because if I can use this as a reinforcer, that's going to extend my reinforcing toolbox. You see? Now that's one of these important things. So we can actually look for them, but we have to observe them very well. And enrichment does not have to be food source. Just remember this. Okay, enrichment can be other things as well. Think about that. All right, so same thing here. So if I talk about relationships and so on, I'm going to use this in my advantage. All right, so this is how that would look like. So you see, I'm just asking, hey, where do you want to be pet? I'm starting to pet. I'm starting to find, like as you see, very massaging or whatever. Just find what I can use, right? Find what I can use. So, okay. And then from there, I need to figure out, okay, do you really enjoy it? That's my next question, obviously. Do you really enjoy this? Now, if the animal places themselves back in that position, I think, we can suggest that, hey, yes, they seem to enjoy it very much. Now, this is now with the dolphin, but you can do it with any animal really to find this out. I'll show you later on a video about the guy from in Poland with his horses. He kind of does the same, and he is actually using it in his advantage to train an animal, which is actually very cool to watch. So therefore we now have to understand, okay, hey, that Peter is all fine and it's all nice and I'm doing this, but then we have to find out, get the information back, like, hey, wait a second, is it that reinforcing for the animal, yes or no? And then the question is, how do we see that? Now, way back in the day, people talked about the 3-second rule or something according to those lines. So you can see with this little fellow there, I invite it. It's like, hey, you want to be pet? No problem. But I want to know, do you really enjoy it? Yes or no? Do you really? It seems to be. It seems to be. It's like, okay, you know what? I put my hand away. And it puts his head back in my hand. So now I can kind of confirm, I think the animal enjoys it at this moment in time. Now, I want to point out as well, the fact that they enjoy it now does not mean that they enjoy it all the time. It's like you and me. If I, if I like to be like tickled on my back, yeah, that's nice right now, but tomorrow I might be like, nah, stop it, it's a bit annoying. So it differs, okay? It differs. Now, a better case here, if I would have a food reinforcer, I directly give a food reinforcer to back it up to then like strengthen this stuff. So we do quickly overuse it. Oh, fine, they like to be pet. I'm going to use this. So let's pet them all the time. Oh, yes, they like carrots. I'm going to use carrots all the time. Yes, I got pellets now. Great, I'm going to use pellets all the time. That's a big risk you're taking right now. And I think that that's where we quickly will say, hey, they do not eat anything. Yes, they do, but the thing that you found, you overused it. So we have satiated the reinforcer. Now, what does satiated mean? Now, I found it out in the animal training book from Karen Mears, and it basically says satiation refers to having a certain reinforcer being used excessively to the point where it no longer has reinforcing value. So you have used it so much that the animal's now like, don't want to use it anymore. It's basically like, I enjoy eating sushi very much. I really enjoy eating sushi. So, but then when I do that too much, all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I cannot see it anymore. I'm done. I'm done. So I satiated myself of sushi in that case. So we overuse it fairly quickly. We have to be careful there. Now, can we then condition other reinforcers? Yes, surely. That's what the science says too. Hey, if I have something new, I can back that up with the primary reinforcer. That's how it often goes. Now, I've also used reinforcers such as the petting or the ball play as a reinforcer to accepting other future reinforcers. I pair them all the time, which is going to help me increase my list of reinforcers, which I can then use variably for my animal. Now, when we know what they seem to enjoy, we can teach new reinforcers. So, antecedents, so the presentation of a new reinforcer. That's basically what I'm going to do. The animal accepts now. If that is just standing there, if that's just eating what I give, if that is just like being touched, if that, whatever. The animal accepts it, which does not mean they enjoy it yet. Now, I'm not sure if you ever heard about gelatin, for example. Now, gelatin is something, it's kind of gummy bears, but then without sugar and stuff, and you have it, I think, based off of bones. You have it based off of fish bones, even you have it based off of algae and so on. So, and the gelatin is actually good for animals because they get more water and all these things, which is especially for animals that are geriatric, seems to help them a little bit. So the one time that I was teaching an animal to eat gelatin, eventually I tried to introduce it to another trainer, and that other trainer went into it as if the animal really liked this reinforcer or liked this gelatin. And she overused it so fast that within a day the behavior broke down of eating gelatin. It's like, okay, wait a second. We went way too fast. We still have to back it up. It was not strong enough. So animal accepts what we give them, and then we give them the likable reinforcer after, if that is, in this case with the sea lion, a fish right after, or if that is petting, for example, with the dolphin or with whoever. So if the animal accepts, that's what we have to do. We have to observe that, and slowly that's going to transfer to that it becomes a likable reinforcer. Slowly. But that takes time. We cannot say from one day, okay, now they eat it, they must like it. No, that's unfortunately not how it works. It would be nice, but unfortunately not how it works. And that's a slow process, but it's just by pairing, and it's not giving it at the same time. Now it's like, accept this, now this. Accept this, now this. That's what it comes down to. So, for example, just like this giraffe. Pretty straightforward, right? So there's a new reinforcer, the conditioned one. In this case, primary reinforcer comes after it. Now look at this. So this is Leonard. He does a fantastic job with his beautiful horses. He trains them so well. Now this is one of them, and this horse, like, he discovered that this animal likes to be pet, and you know, he does all of these relate sessions and play and stuff like this. So I told him, it's like, hey, can you do a training session without food? And it was very new for him. And I really enjoy doing these type of sessions, because that's really builds your relationship. It really builds your trainer skill. You really have to think outside the box and observe. So, and I asked him to do this. And he said, hey, you know what, this animal kind of likes to be pet and stuff like this. And then I said, well, add some running in there too, some higher action with this horse, and see what happens. This worked incredibly well. Now from here he started to add in then the food reinforcers again and so on. So all of a sudden he extended his reinforcement toolbox so extreme that now motivation of wanting to participate, or the willingness to participate, actually increased drastically, because there's a variation of likable reinforcers, really, at the end of the day. Because I believe that variation is key. So anytime somebody asks on the forums and stuff, hey everybody, what is the favorite reinforcer of this and this animal? Or hey, whatever a breed of dog should I use reinforcer wise and stuff. This is very personal, but at the same time, I believe variation is key. So what if that one thing that they seem to enjoy, it might come by a surprise, and it's mixed into this variation system. Now then also, like, I'm gonna be like, okay, when do I get it? And everything is fun, it's nice, it's great, that's gonna happen. So there's curiosity happening that builds motivation now. And if I place it right, then learning goes quite fast, so I progress quite quick. So this is where this comes in, and this is actually, especially, I think, if I'm right, I learned it in the marine mammal world, and I think that's where it comes from, but I'm not 100% sure. I learned it there. Now it's called VRRV, so it's a variable ratio of reinforcement variety. That's what it basically is. Now I really enjoy applying this, a lot of it. Now let me explain you how this works. Now this is a little bit, what is it called? Maybe a little advanced. So I'm gonna try to guide you through it. So basically what we do, we change when you reinforce. So when in the behavior you're going to reinforce, blow your whistle, mark, and so on. That's what you're gonna do. That's the ratio. Then you're also gonna change how you reinforce and what you reinforce. Now these things together maintains behavior extremely well, like very strongly, and it reinforces the animal best, I think, and your relationship obviously goes up as well. Now, so variable ratio, you basically reinforce after X amount of variable repetition. So now imagine, I'm asking, let's make it the easiest thing. You have a horse. I'm asking, stamp your feet. So I say, whatever the cue is, stamp your feet. Now I wait. Add stamps 1, 2, 3, 4, and I say toot or click or whatever my marker or bridge is. Great. So now I did it after 4 times. The next time I'm going to do it after 2 times. But the horse doesn't know this. I know that. Next time it has to stamp its feet 8 times instead. So the horse doesn't really know when the marker comes. So it's going to do that behavior on a high rate and on high criteria. Like it looks very good because it doesn't know when the marker comes. If then on top of that there's a variable reinforcement in place, so it doesn't know what it's going to get, but it's going to be good and it's variable all the time, basically I'm maintaining behavior on the highest level. That's basically what I'm doing. So, but it requires from the trainer to pay a lot of attention to what we're doing. A lot of attention. It should be very, very detailed. You have to recognize what we're looking at. So some people would say a behavior is when I click or mark the behavior. So let's say the animal stamps his feet. So the whole behavior is 5 times stamping your feet. But actually, that's not the case. One behavior is one stamping. Next one is up, down. Next one is up, down. Next one is up, down. That's basically how it goes. So, and then I can count that, and that's the ratio. And then I can say after 5 times stamping, I reinforce. After 2 times, or after 10 times, and so on. That's your variable ratio. Maintenance behavior on a high level. So the best way to increase motivation. So this is kind of how it looks like, variable ratio. Then after 2 stamps, I reinforce. After 4, or after 3, sorry. After 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. After 10. You know, there's variability in there all the time. That's your variable ratio, really. Now I'm going to show you how that works. I've done 2 little things there actually. So I ask a behavior and I blow my whistle. Then I ask the next behavior, blow my whistle. Then the next behavior, blow my whistle. So what's happening, I'm not reinforcing like physically with something after the whistle. So there's a variable already, which the dogs are very, very used to. And then within the behavior that I'm asking, so let it be the wave, this is a behavior 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I pay enough attention to it, I can actually put variable ratio into this as well. So that's how detailed it becomes. But that's that variable ratio that I'm talking about. Then you have your variable reinforcement. So reinforcement variety. I'm basically mixing primary with secondary. Now I want to pinpoint that dolphins are very curious animals. So, you know, you see that with sea lions, the same thing. I think horses actually somewhere as well. Dogs actually somewhere as well. Very, you know, curious by nature in comparison to a hoofstock species. So up here I'm just playing, you know, and because I use so many different types of reinforcement as you see listed above with that primary, even though it reinforces the big jump that I asked, it's also actually reinforcing each other's reinforcer again. So I'm clapping, rub down, herring. So the herring actually reinforces the rub down, clapping, plus it reinforces that jump. Then the ball capelin. Capelin is a fish species, so the capelin also reinforces the ball. And that whole thing connected to it. Surely, if I go too long, it doesn't connect it to that jump anymore. So I have to be somewhere a little bit careful. Now, if I mix these two together, basically what you see is this. So there you go, when I smack them all back together. So it goes even further into detail if you really look at that little wave or that fluke slap. Basically, one fluke slap is one behavior. So if I would count those, I can go even in further detail. But that's how advanced reinforcement can go, essentially, all right? So now, we can also get into let them choose. Now we can flip, the flip side is, why don't we teach them, let's get rid of the variability and just give away what we have. Hey, this is what I have, choose from this. Now I can do that as well. Now that's basically with Marcus. Marcus is a chimpanzee who didn't seem to enjoy anything. We gave them obviously the food that they have to eat. And every time we thought, okay, hey, he's eating now cucumber, let's use cucumber. Then he didn't want cucumber anymore. And the next time it's like, okay, I can see him eating tomato now. Okay, let's use tomato. Didn't want tomato anymore. It's okay, hey, I see him now eating oranges. Okay, great, let's use oranges. No oranges anymore. It's like, okay, so we're now sort of running after the fact, like it doesn't work. So the question then was, can we use it? Can we use it differently? Why don't we just say, you know what, instead of us figuring out what he wants to eat, why don't you let him pick? So the trainer teaches him from all of a sudden not wanting to have anything anymore to a point where he's like, okay, hey, look what I have. And they're fairly curious animals. And slowly she started the process of, why don't you just pick what you want? On the very early stages of training, this one, it's like the hands here and there, but it's the process of you can choose, you can choose, you can choose. Now the cool thing is really that there was one story, and this story was with I think that was at London Zoo, and they used this strategy with a gorilla, and they made it really, they flipped it completely around. So they said the gorilla can choose first what it wants to be reinforced with, to then do the behavior and then get the reinforcer it chose beforehand. So then they saw he choosing apple all the time, so they decided, you know what, we're gonna skip this whole choice system, we just give it apple. And then the animal didn't want to do the behaviors anymore, so they discovered it was that choosing system, essentially. That's like the next further step up. Now I've, in the cooperative care conferences I've done in COVID time, 21, 22, 23, somewhere there, I think it was, there was the animal training center in Austria. And the cool thing, what they've done, is a fantastic place, very skilled trainers out there. What they've done was trained the dogs, and it took them quite some time. They said, you know what, we trained them to touch a specific shape on the wall, and they have 5 different ones, I believe it was 5, and each shape meant a different consequence. So one was petting, one was ball play, one was food, and one was something else. And so the animal could actually, the dog could actually choose after behavior, which reinforcement do you want? Go pick one out of this 5 symbols, basically. So it was very cool to talk about this with them, to see how far you can push that. So yeah, anyway, so there you go. We don't always have to use food sources. It's all about you observing so well that you can actually use reinforcement in your advantage, really. And you know, we can place animals in situations where they're able to show us what they enjoy. Enrichment programs, perfect one. but also, hey, how do you want to play with this ball? That's a very big one. Like, okay, I see him play with a ball by themselves. Now, let it be a dolphin or dog, same thing. And you can see that the dog is nonstop going whatever up the stairs and throwing the ball down, grabbing the ball, going up the stairs, throwing the ball down. It's like, hey, why don't we play this game together? And hey, if I play this game together, can I use it now as a reinforcer to a behavior I'm going to request? And then all of a sudden, we discover how they want to play or how they want to interact with their environment. And then we're slowly going to use that in our advantage. And all of a sudden, we extend our trainer toolbox with more reinforcers. Like, hey, now all of a sudden, I can apply variability. So that's kind of how I like to go by it. And really, with any animal, I've worked with many, many animals. We've done many, many species. This is kind of how we figured out different food sources, different reinforcers, different play times, enrichment, and so on. So I would like to thank you very much. I hope you really enjoyed this free webinar. I recorded. I'm going to put it on YouTube ASAP for you guys so you can rewatch it. Before we stop completely, I will go right away into the Q&A, but make sure you're here as well at this webinar, which is next Thursday. It's the 26th of March. Again, 7 p.m. Brisbane time, because I'm currently in Australia. And we're going to talk about the emergency recall, and we're going to look at where are the biggest challenges, because where does it really going wrong in our training process? Because there's a lot of times that we're like, hey, you know what? I cannot get it any faster. Hey, they do not accept each other. All right, Sava, would you count reinforcements right also in different amounts, the same reinforcement? Yes, guarantee. So you can make it as crazy as you want. Now, when I look up in the science and stuff, and especially what Mr. Skinner says, he basically says the way you reinforce is more important as what you reinforce. So, okay, so I can basically use different amounts. I can, if I talk, for example, about pellets only, when I have pellets, I can put the pellets in water so they become a different substance. I can make bigger balls out of them. I can keep them dry. I can put the dry pellets in another basket. I can feed it from hand. I can mix it with Luzerne stuff. I can mix it, put a bit of water so I get bigger balls from it. I can keep on going. The biggest thing is often, I'm going to go a little bit more advanced for you guys. The biggest thing often is what you don't think is a difference is for them the world. In front of an animal, I'm a very big clown as well. I'm very energetic. I'm very like, hey, let's run, let's do this, let's do that. But at the same time, I can also like put my energy all the way back down. That's helping me a lot. But what you see very often is we think we do this. Good job. Good job. Is enough for the animal to repeat the behavior again. And I don't think that that's the case. And sometimes what we see is like, hey, you know what, I just reinforced it heavily and that's it. But if I do this, here's a handful. Well done. You still might not receive the same impact as when I would do this. Yes, here's a handful. Well done. Here you have more. Good, great. So I've learned in my career through people that coached me that said to me, Peter, are you happy? Are you happy that the animal did a great job? And I said, yeah. And then the only thing they said, well, show them then. Show them that you're happy. It's all right. So that's how I kind of went by it. But yes, anyway, so different amounts is also very helpful. Yeah, definitely. And I really enjoy short, successful sessions. That's what I do a lot as well. So don't overdo it, really. But that all has an impact on the strength of your reinforcer at the end of the day. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming. A little different time zone, I believe, than the one we did the other day. But anyway, hopefully in the near future, we'll be back in the other time zone as well. So thank you for coming, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.